She's not going to suddenly whip out a pair of Maison Margiela tabbies because some New York City transplant fresh out of college told her that they're the height of fashion. Hi there, my name is Tessa, and The Devil Wears Prada is without a doubt one of the most influential movies of my entire life. And I literally spent years trying to become Andy Sachs. I lived in New York, I became a journalist, I worked in fashion, but sadly, life isn't like the movies, and at no point did I ever get a $1,000 pair of boots or an all-expense trip to Paris. But a girl can still dream. Now, as someone who considers themselves a professional hater, I wasn't very excited about the possibility of a sequel to one of my favorite movies, especially in this day and age when Hollywood seems to be half-assing everything. And after seeing some recent photos from the set of The Devil Wears Prada 2, I have to admit, I'm still on the fence about it. The Devil Wears Prada was based on the 2003 book of the same name, which was written by Lauren Weisberger, who had worked at Vogue a few years earlier as the personal assistant of editor-in-chief Anna Wintour. The movie deviates from the source material a good amount, and it seems as though the sequel will be following in its footsteps, choosing to ignore 2013's Revenge Wears Prada: The Devil Returns and 2018's When Life Gives You Lululemons. Instead, The Devil Wears Prada 2 will follow Miranda amidst the decline of traditional magazine publishing, forcing her to go head-to-head with her ex-assistant Emily Charlton, now a major executive at a luxury group, whose advertising dollars Miranda desperately needs. We don't know what Andy has been up to, but she doesn't appear to be working for Miranda directly, although I suspect that they might still be in somewhat close proximity to each other. Considering Miranda represents Anna Wintour and Runway is Vogue magazine, there's a pretty high chance that Andy is working at one of Elias Clark, aka Condé Nast's, other publications. I'm gonna guess some iteration of The New Yorker or Wired, just based off of her interest in serious reporting in the first movie. Which means that if Elias Clark is run at all similarly to Condé Nast, it would mean that Miranda is still kind of her boss. On the plus side, the entire main cast, which includes Anne Hathaway, Meryl Streep, Emily Blunt, and Stanley Tucci, have all agreed to return for the sequel, which is a step in the right direction. And it's amazing to see how quickly Meryl slipped back into the character, because she's every bit as terrifying as she was 20 years ago. Lily, who is played by Tracy Toms, will be making a reappearance. And while I have my fair share of problems with Andy's friends in the first movie, I do like the idea of her still being in Andy's life. Although realistically, I feel like the movie is just going to give her some kind of glorified cameo where she maybe helps Andy with like a favor or something. Andy's boyfriend Nate will not be returning, however, which doesn't really surprise me considering their relationship was already a mess in the first movie. And realistically, Andy was not going to settle down with the guy that she was dating when she was 23. A new addition to the cast is Kenneth Branagh, who will be playing Miranda's fourth husband. And considering his name recognition, I suspect he'll have a larger role in the movie than her third. A couple of other actors will be joining the film as well, including Lucy Liu, BJ Novak, Justin Theroux, Pauline Chalamet, and Simone Ashley. Although we don't know what they're going to be getting up to yet. But if I had to guess, I would think that Lucy is probably going to be doing a similar thing as Gisele Bündchen in the first movie, where she's kind of just there to be glamorous and recognizable. And I'm totally pulling this out of my ass, but I have a feeling that BJ and Justin might be playing Andy and Emily's husbands, only because they have like a somewhat similar vibe and energy. I also think that Simone will probably be playing one of Emily's lackeys, and Pauline will be playing one of Miranda's. And that's purely based off of the wardrobe, since there's a lot of overlap between them and their potential bosses. Speaking of which, back in 2006, the average person's knowledge of high fashion was actually pretty limited. And the movie was credited with increasing sales and name recognition of a lot of the brands that were featured in it. That's a big part of why it was so successful, since it was one of the first times we got an inside look at this weird and wild world that we'd never seen before. Nowadays, things are very different, with TikTok, Instagram, and Pinterest bringing high fashion right to your fingertips. Although I personally don't think that accessibility has made people any more discerning, as evidenced by the current discourse revolving around the sequel's costumes. Patricia Field was the costume designer for the first film and went on to receive a well-deserved Oscar nomination for her work. She'd already made a name for herself in the high fashion space with Sex and the City, and she continued with her distinctive flamboyant style in other projects like Confessions of a Shopaholic and Ugly Betty. Now 83 years old, Patricia seems to have effectively retired from costume design, only working in a consulting capacity. And she seems to have passed the baton to her protege, Molly Rogers, who worked with Patricia on many of her early projects. Molly is currently the lead costume designer on the Sex and the City sequel series, and Just Like That. And after doing some digging, she also appears to be responsible for The Devil Wears Prada 2. I've had people say that Patricia Field's work on the first movie isn't costume design, to which I say, don't speak to me again. Kidding. But regardless of whether or not a garment is custom made for a production, as long as it's intended to help with world building, storytelling, and character development, it's a costume. Just because it's modern doesn't change that fact. It just really shows the lack of respect that people have for contemporary costume design, since they think that because the people look normal, it means that no work went into what they're wearing, which couldn't be further from the case. But of course, when it comes to historical movies, like 2013's Belle, which got most of its costumes from other projects, no one says a thing and never calls it styling. From a character building standpoint, I do think that Molly's costumes are just a bit weaker than Patricia's, although admittedly, I've only seen very little of them with no context, so I am taking it with a grain of salt. Although I personally like all of the workwear moments that we've seen so far, like I would totally wear them myself, I feel like I'm not seeing a lot of differences between Emily and Miranda and Andy in regard to their silhouette or color palette, which was one of the things that the first movie really excelled at. I think that these similarities might be because Molly Rogers just tends to gravitate towards specific trends, which is why everyone has collared blouses and wide-leg trousers and chunky belts and hoop earrings. It is accurate to what people are wearing today, it's just not very innovative. Of all of the characters, I think that this direction makes the most sense when it comes to Miranda, because it's actually not that far off from what she wore in the first movie. And you have to remember that at that point, she was already in her mid-50s, so she'd already discovered her signature look. So she definitely wasn't going to be changing it in her 70s. It's the same reason that Anna Wintour has been wearing the exact same thing for the last 30 years. She's not going to suddenly whip out a pair of Maison Margiela tabbies because some New York City transplant fresh out of college told her that they're the height of fashion. Where I'm a bit more confused about the sequel's direction is in regard to Andy and Emily's wardrobe, which isn't really telling me much. I'm assuming that Andy's vests and suits are supposed to signal that she's like a working professional who we're supposed to take seriously, but unless she's still in the fashion space, I don't think it makes sense for her to be running around in $1,000 golden goose boots and vintage Jean Paul Gaultier. Maybe at that point she is already working for Miranda, which would explain why this denim outfit is such a deviation from everything else that we've seen her in. And I do like that it's a nice little callback to the first film. The only outfit that I've outright disliked is this rainbow dress, but I'm pretty sure that it's meant to be goofy looking, as it's very different from everything else that Anne Hathaway has been seen wearing. And I'm pretty sure that it's meant to signal Andy's shift from her usual job to working for Miranda again. We also see her with a suitcase and boarding the Hampton Jitney, so I'm assuming she's off to some beach party where she's meant to be representing runway. People really want Molly to slap every single fashion trend onto the characters, but do you not remember the movie Not Okay, where the character is so chronically online and devoid of personality that her outfits were literally out of fashion by the time the movie came out, which was the point, so they did a good job. If they had the characters wear everything that went viral on TikTok, the movie would look super dated super quickly. Like if you rewatch the original movie, Patricia Field did a really good job of making the outfits look appealing and fashion-forward without leaning into too many of the trends from 2006. There's no dresses over jeans, multi-layered lace camis, or micro miniskirts. You know, the things that people actually were wearing at the time. I mean, just compare the outfits in the movie to Material Girls, Aquamarine, and John Tucker Must Die. They're purposely littered with a bunch of 2000s trends to fit the setting and the characters' personalities. Don't get me wrong, the outfits are still fun and cute, but it's a totally different vibe from The Devil Wears Prada. Now, there are some things like the hats and the wide belts that make it obvious that it was 2006, but because Patricia was aiming for timelessness instead of trendiness, the outfits have been able to stand the test of time. Now, I have seen some people complaining about all of the paparazzi shots that are getting released and how they're spoiling the surprise, but I'm in complete disagreement. First of all, I think it's a really smart marketing strategy because they're building up all of this hype for a movie that doesn't even come out for another year. And in the process, they're not actually revealing anything that important. Like, it's just random exterior shots. So for all we know, it could be a 30-second montage. Or maybe they're pulling a Batman, where they're kind of expecting us to see these photos, and then they're gonna pull the rug out from under us. The other reason that I'm pretty okay with this is the fact that the exact same thing happened when they were filming the first movie. It's to be expected when you're filming on location, especially in New York. And some of those paparazzi shots are the only reason that we even know what some of the outfits in the first movie look like in their entirety. So I'm not gonna complain. For now, I still don't think that this movie needed to be made, but I wouldn't mind being proven wrong. That's it for this video, and I will see you next time. Bye!